First Contact's Price. Admiral Vereen stood at the command deck of the Kilari warship Eternal Dawn, her iridescent scales shifting from deep blue to violet as she studied the holographic projection of Earth. The third planet of an unremarkable solar system shouldn't have caught the Dominion's attention, but the quantum signatures emanating from its surface told a different story. "Show me the analysis again," she commanded, her four-fingered hand gesturing at the data stream. Her second-in-command, Commander Thex, stepped forward, his scales a neutral gray of professional detachment. "The species calls themselves humans," Thex began, bringing up detailed scans. "They've achieved quantum computing, rudimentary AI integration, and are on the verge of cracking gravity manipulation. Their rate of technological advancement is—" He paused, searching for the right word, "concerning." Vereen watched as images flashed before her, primitive chemical rockets giving way to ion drives within a single generation, basic orbital platforms evolving into sprawling space stations in mere decades. But what truly caught her attention were the military installations. Unlike the unified defense networks of civilized species, human military bases belong to different nations, often pointing weapons at each other as much as the stars. Such division, she mused, yet they advance so quickly. "How?" "That's the peculiar part, Admiral," Thex responded, bringing up more data. "They seem to advance fastest during conflicts. Their greatest technological leaps coincide with what they call wars, periods of intense fighting between their own factions." Vereen's scales rippled with disbelief. "They fight themselves and still progress. This defies everything we know about societal development." The Kilari Dominion had ruled a quarter of the galaxy for 3,000 cycles, bringing order and peaceful advancement to countless species. Their doctrine was simple: unity breeds progress, division breeds stagnation. Yet here was a species that thrived on conflict, that turned internal strife into a forge for advancement. "Their latest breakthrough," Thex continued, "is particularly troubling. The hologram shifted to show a massive facility in a region the humans called Nevada. They're close to developing practical quantum entanglement communication. At their current rate, they'll achieve it within 5 years." Vereen felt her scales shift to the deep purple of decision. Quantum entanglement communication was a threshold technology. Once a species mastered it, their advancement would accelerate exponentially. The Dominion had strict protocols for such situations. "The Council's orders are clear," she said, her voice carrying the weight of centuries of Kilari doctrine. "We must integrate them into the Dominion before they become a threat to galactic stability. Prepare a demonstration of force." "Admiral," Thex's scales flickered with concern, "the Nevada facility contains nearly 10,000 humans." "Then we shall show them mercy," Vereen replied. "Target their power systems only. When they see how easily we can disable their strongest military installation, they'll understand the futility of resistance. Sometimes, Commander, the kindest path is to show strength early, to prevent greater bloodshed later." As orders rippled through the Eternal Dawn, Vereen watched Earth rotate slowly in the holographic display. The humans' fractured nature reminded her of ancient Kilari history, before the Dominion brought unity to their people. This demonstration would be a gift, she told herself. The first step in helping humanity overcome their primitive divisions. "Weapons locked on target," Thex reported. "Awaiting your command." Vereen's scales shifted to the ceremonial gold of formal action. "For peace," she said, the traditional words feeling hollow somehow, "and unity." The Eternal Dawn's quantum lance pierced the Nevada night like artificial lightning, precise and powerful. In seconds, the facility's power grid collapsed, its defenses went dark, and its quantum research laboratories fell silent. "Minimal casualties," Thex reported. "The facility is neutralized." "Good," Vereen replied. "Prepare a transmission to their global communication networks. It's time to explain to humanity their place in the galactic order." But as she watched the aftermath unfold on the tactical displays, something felt wrong. The humans weren't responding with the fear or awe she expected. Instead, Across their planet, military installations were going dark. Communications were being rerouted, and thousands of small ships were changing course in perfect coordination. "Commander," she said slowly, her scales shifting to the gray-green of uncertainty, "why do I feel we've just made a terrible mistake?" In the darkness below, humanity was indeed responding, but not in any way the Kilari could have predicted. The Nevada facility's destruction wasn't the end of a conflict, it was just the beginning. And the lesson the Dominion would learn about humanity wouldn't be one of submission, but of the terrible efficiency with which humans could turn peace into war. The silent response. Dr. Elena Santos stood in the ruins of the Nevada Quantum Research Facility, her eyes fixed on the perfectly circular hole where the Kilari weapon had pierced the main reactor housing. Around her, teams worked in near-total silence, collecting samples and taking measurements. No one spoke above a whisper, not out of fear, but from intense concentration. "Dr. Santos," a voice called softly. She turned to see General Michael Chen approaching, his usual formal demeanor replaced by an almost predatory focus. "The Joint Chiefs need your analysis. What exactly are we dealing with?" Elena held up a handheld scanner, its display showing energy signatures that shouldn't have been possible. "Their weapon wasn't designed to destroy, General. It was designed to disable, with surgical precision. They could have vaporized this entire facility, but instead, they targeted our power systems with microscopic accuracy." "A warning shot," Chen said, his voice flat. "No," Elena corrected, her eyes lighting up with the fierce intensity that had made her Earth's leading quantum physicist. "A demonstration of superiority. They wanted to show us how far ahead of us they are technologically." She smiled, a sharp expression that didn't reach her eyes. "They made the same mistake the British made at Singapore." Chen raised an eyebrow. "They showed their hand too early." "Exactly. Every weapon leaves traces, General. Energy signatures, radiation patterns, quantum disturbances. They just gave us a perfect look at their technology level." She gestured at the teams working around them. "And now we have something better than their technical specifications. We have proof that their theories work." Across the planet, humanity's response to first contact was unlike anything the Kilari could have anticipated. There was no global panic, no mass hysteria, no breakdown of society. Instead, the world went quiet. Military channels fell silent. Civilian internet traffic continued normally, filled with cat videos and social media posts. To the Kilari observers, it almost seemed as if humanity was ignoring the attack. Nothing could have been further from the truth. In an underground facility beneath the Japanese countryside, Dr. Yuki Tanaka reviewed the Nevada data, her hands dancing over holographic displays. "The Kilari quantum lens operates on principles we theorized but could never prove," she explained to the assembled military leaders. "They just proved our theories correct. Better yet, they showed us where our math went wrong." In a secure bunker beneath Moscow, Russian quantum computing experts were already running simulations based on the attack data. "Their targeting systems are perfect," Dr. Dmitry Volkov reported to his superiors. "But perfect systems have perfect patterns, and patterns can be predicted." In Silicon Valley, tech companies quietly shifted their AI development focus. Social media algorithms that had been designed to predict human behavior were repurposed to analyze Kilari communication patterns. Gaming companies that had spent decades creating artificial opponents for video games now turned their expertise to modeling alien combat tactics. But the most significant response came from an unexpected source. In a hidden facility beneath the South African desert, Dr. Amara Okoro, a theoretical physicist who had been labeled a crackpot for her controversial papers on quantum manipulation, found herself suddenly at the center of humanity's technological revolution. "The Kilari think they showed us how advanced they are," she explained to an emergency session of the United Nations Security Council, conducted through quantum-encrypted channels. "What they actually showed us is that the laws of physics work exactly the way we thought they might. They didn't give us their technology. They gave us proof that our theories are correct. Admiral Vereen, watching Earth from her command ship, was growing increasingly uneasy. The humans' response didn't match any of the Dominion's first contact protocols. There should have been attempts at communication, displays of military strength, or signs of submission. Instead, there was nothing. "They're up to something," she told Commander Thex, her scales shifting to the mottled patterns of worry. "No species has ever reacted this way." "Perhaps they're in shock," Thex suggested, but his scales showed he didn't believe it. "No," Vereen said slowly. "They're adapting." But to what? She studied the global displays, noting how human military installations were systematically going dark, how their satellite networks were subtly shifting, how their communication patterns were changing in ways her analysts couldn't quite understand. In the Nevada facility, Dr. Santos finished her final analysis and sent it to the global defense network that was forming in the shadows of the Internet. "The Kilari wanted to show us how powerful they are," she told General Chen. "Instead, they showed us exactly how to beat them." Chen looked at the devastation around them, then back at Santos. "How long?" Their weapon was precise, efficient, and followed every law of physics exactly as their doctrine demanded, she said, her smile growing wider. "They fight like machines, General. And humanity has been breaking machines since we first picked up stones. Around the world, in hidden labs and secret facilities, humanity began to do what it had always done best: adapt, improvise, and prepare to fight back. The Kilari had expected submission and received silence. Soon, they would learn why Earth's silence was more dangerous than any immediate response could have been. When humanity finally broke their silence, the galaxy would never be the same. Innovation's edge. The Kilari battle cruiser Righteous Dawn hung in high orbit over Earth, its crystalline hull refracting sunlight in patterns that would have been beautiful if they weren't so terrifying. On its bridge, Admiral Vereen watched with growing concern as her tactical officers tried to make sense of the sensor readings. "Impossible," her weapons officer muttered, his scales flickering between confusion and fear. "The humans are launching primitive chemical rockets. Hundreds of them." Vereen studied the trajectories of the ascending vehicles. They were crude by Kilari standards, simple metal tubes propelled by burning fuel. Her tactical systems classified them as barely more threatening than space debris. Yet something about their flight patterns bothered her. "They're not attacking," she realized suddenly. "They're not even aimed at us. They're," her eyes widened, "scatter the fleet." Now, her warning came too late. The rockets detonated, not in explosions, but in bursts of charged particles that the Kilari had dismissed as atmospheric interference. In seconds, a web of quantum-entangled fields bloomed across Earth orbit, created by devices that Dr. Santos and her team had conceived after studying the Nevada attack. "What are they doing?" Commander Thex demanded as the ship's quantum sensors began to malfunction. "This technology is centuries behind ours. It shouldn't be able to affect our systems." In her hidden laboratory beneath Johannesburg, Dr. Okoro watched the operation unfold through hastily assembled quantum viewing arrays. "The Kilari are right," she explained to the United Earth Defense Council. "Our technology is primitive compared to theirs, but they forgot something fundamental about humanity. We don't always need the best tools to win. We just need to understand how the tools work." The quantum web wasn't meant to damage the Kilari ships. Instead, it did something far more insidious. It created a field of quantum uncertainty that made their perfect targeting systems suddenly, catastrophically unreliable. Basic physics, Dr. Tanaka had explained during the planning phase. Their weapons rely on quantum precision. We can't match that precision, but we can disrupt it, like using a sledgehammer to break a Swiss watch. The first real battle between humanity and the Kilari began not with an exchange of fire, but with the sound of silence. Across the Kilari fleet, quantum communication systems stuttered and failed. Targeting computers that could normally hit targets from orbit with millimeter precision, suddenly couldn't distinguish between a human warship and its own shadow. That's when the real attack began. From hidden bases across Earth's surface, humanity launched their true weapons, ships that appeared crude and primitive to Kilari sensors, but contained innovations that would reshape space warfare forever. Dr. Santos had called them Trojan horses, a reference that the Kilari would soon come to understand all too well. "Admiral," Thex shouted as the first wave of human ships approached. "They're using projectile weapons." Indeed, the human vessels were firing what appeared to be simple metal slugs. The Kilari crews almost laughed, until those slugs passed straight through their energy shields as if they weren't there. "Their shields are calibrated for energy weapons," Dr. Volkov had explained while designing the weapons. They never considered that someone would be primitive enough to use physical projectiles in space combat. But the real surprise came when the slugs hit. Each impact released a cascade of quantum effects that the humans had reverse-engineered from studying the Nevada attack. The Kilari's own technology turned against them in ways they had never imagined possible. "This isn't possible," Vereen whispered as she watched her perfect formation dissolve into chaos. "They're centuries behind us. Their technology is primitive. Their society is divided." On her tactical display, she watched as human ships executed maneuvers that defied conventional space combat doctrine. They didn't fight in the ordered, efficient patterns that the Kilari had perfected over millennia. Instead, they fought like their planet's apex predators, adapting, coordinating without seeming to communicate, turning their very limitations into advantages. In her South African laboratory, Dr. Okoro allowed herself a small smile as she watched the battle unfold. "The Kilari made 3 fundamental mistakes," she explained to the Defense Council. "First, they assumed technological superiority equals tactical superiority. Second, they thought our divisions made us weak, when in fact, they'd made us adaptable. And third," she paused, watching as another Kilari cruiser's perfect defenses were undone by humanity's primitive weapons. "They showed us exactly how their technology worked, then gave us time to think about it." The battle lasted less than 6 hours. When it was over, the Kilari fleet had suffered its first major defeat in over 1,000 years. But more importantly, they had learned something that would change their understanding of warfare forever. Sometimes the most dangerous opponent isn't the one with the best technology, but the one who can turn your own strengths against you. As the surviving Kilari ships retreated to regroup, Admiral Vereen's scales had shifted to a color that hadn't been seen in her species for generations, the deep crimson of fundamental uncertainty. She had come to teach humanity their place in the galactic order. Instead, humanity had taught her that everything the Dominion knew about warfare might be wrong. And in laboratories and command centers across Earth, humanity was just getting started. The Kilari had given them a glimpse of advanced technology, thinking it would intimidate them. Instead, they had given humanity exactly what it needed most: proof that their wildest theories could work, and the motivation to make them work now. The galaxy was about to learn why humanity's greatest strength wasn't its technology or its unity, but its endless capacity to adapt, improvise, and overcome. Breaking formation. The Kilari High Command Center was in chaos. The holographic displays showed something that hadn't been seen in a millennium: a Dominion fleet in full retreat. But it wasn't the retreat that terrified the assembled admirals. It was the way the humans had achieved it. "They're not fighting properly," Fleet Commander Zix declared, his scales shifting between rage and confusion. "Their ships move independently, without proper formation. They ignore established combat protocols. He struggled to find the words. They're fighting like barbarians." In the center of the command room, Supreme Admiral Kress watched the tactical replays with all 4 eyes narrowed in concentration. The humans had taken everything the Dominion knew about space combat and turned it inside out. "Show me their attack patterns again," she ordered. The hologram shifted, showing human ships moving in what seemed like random chaos. But Kress had commanded fleets for 2 centuries. She could see the deadly logic behind the apparent disorder. "They're not fighting like barbarians," she said slowly. "They're fighting like their planet's predators. Look." She gestured at the display. "These ships here, they're moving like what humans call wolf packs. These others are employing ambush tactics similar to their big cats. They've taken their entire evolutionary history and turned it into a combat doctrine." Meanwhile, aboard the human carrier U.S. Adaptation, Captain Maya Rodriguez was proving just how right Cress's assessment was. Her ship, disguised as debris from earlier battles, drifted silently through space as a Kilari patrol passed nearby. "Hold position," she whispered, though the advanced quantum dampeners Dr. Santos had developed made such caution unnecessary. Her crew, trained in what they called submarine warfare doctrine, maintained perfect silence out of habit. The Kilari ships, magnificent in their crystalline perfection, maintained their precise formation as they passed. They were looking for human ships, but their definition of ships was too narrow, too rigid. They were looking for vessels operating under standard combat protocols. Rodriguez smiled. Humanity had stopped following standard protocols the moment they realized the Kilari couldn't adapt to anything else. "Now," she ordered. The debris field came alive. What the Kilari had dismissed as wreckage transformed into a dozen small, agile craft. Each one had been designed based on a different predatory animal from Earth: sharks, eagles, lions, their movements unpredictable yet perfectly coordinated. The Kilari never stood a chance. Their weakness is their perfection, Dr. Okoro had explained while helping design these ships. They've spent millennia optimizing their technology and tactics. But optimization means specialization, and specialization means vulnerability to the unexpected. In her command center beneath Johannesburg, Dr. Okoro watched the battle through quantum-entangled sensors her team had reverse-engineered from Kilari technology. "They still don't understand," she told General Chen. "Every time they fall back on their standard tactics, they give us more data about how their systems work. Every retreat teaches us more about their technology." The Kilari were learning, but too slowly. Their entire civilization was built on the idea of perfect order, of systematic advancement. They couldn't comprehend how a species could turn chaos itself into a weapon. Supreme Admiral Cress watched another fleet fall to human guerrilla tactics. "They're not just adapting our technology," she realized. "They're adapting their entire history of warfare. Look here." She pointed to a successful human ambush. "That's ancient Roman tactics, adapted for space. Here, that's clearly inspired by naval warfare from their age of sail. They're taking everything they've ever learned about fighting and applying it in ways we never imagined possible." But the humans' most devastating innovation wasn't technological or tactical. It was psychological. They had studied Kilari communication patterns and realized that the Dominion's military effectiveness depended on rigid adherence to protocols. So they began to attack those protocols themselves. Human ships would send out false signals matching Kilari command codes, but slightly wrong. Just wrong enough to create doubt. They would mimic Kilari formations, but with subtle irregularities that forced Kilari commanders to question their own standard responses. "Uncertainty is the ultimate weapon," Dr. Tanaka had theorized. "A species that relies on perfect order cannot function effectively when that order is disrupted." She was right. Across the Dominion fleet, command structures began to break down. Officers trained to follow exact protocols now faced situations where those protocols not only failed but made them vulnerable. Ships equipped with perfect targeting systems found themselves unable to lock onto targets that deliberately moved imperfectly. Back in the High Command Center, Supreme Admiral Cress made a decision that would change the course of the war. "We must adapt," she declared, her scales shifting to the rare copper tone of fundamental change. "For the first time in our history, perfection has become a weakness." The assembled admirals stared at her in shock. The suggestion that perfection could be a weakness was nearly blasphemous in Kilari culture. But the evidence was undeniable. Humanity's chaotic adaptation was overwhelming their perfect order. As if to emphasize this point, another report arrived. Humans had successfully captured a Kilari dreadnought, not through superior technology or overwhelming force, but by using what they called social engineering. They had studied Kilari communication patterns so well that they managed to convince the ship's crew to let them aboard. How do we fight an enemy that turns our greatest strengths against us? Fleet Commander Zix demanded. Cress watched as another perfect formation was broken by human guerrilla tactics. Perhaps, she said slowly, we need to learn from them. Not their technology, but their adaptability. Their willingness to embrace imperfection in pursuit of victory. The words tasted strange to her, against everything she had been taught. But as she watched the tactical displays, she couldn't deny their truth. The humans weren't winning because they were stronger or more advanced. They were winning because they had turned the very concept of warfare into something the Kilari had never imagined possible. And somewhere in the darkness of space, Captain Rodriguez's wolf pack was already planning their next hunt, proving with every engagement that in the face of humanity's endless adaptation, even perfection could be a fatal flaw. The warning. The Kilari Dominion's greatest fleet hung in formation above Earth, 3,000 warships, their crystalline hulls gleaming in the light of humanity's sun. It was the largest military force ever assembled in the galaxy's history, gathered for what Supreme Admiral Cress had called the final dialogue with humanity. But something was wrong. Where are their ships? Fleet Commander Zix demanded, his scales shifting rapidly between confusion and fear. Our sensors detect no major fleet movements, no defensive formations, not even their primitive orbital platforms. Admiral Vereen, recently promoted despite her earlier defeat, studied the sensor readings with all four eyes. The humans had proven themselves masters of deception, but this was different. Earth seemed almost undefended. Then the transmission came. On every Kilari ship, on every command frequency, a single human face appeared. Dr. Elena Santos, now Earth's chief of scientific development, looked at them with an expression that contained neither fear nor hostility. We received your message about this being the final dialogue, she said calmly. We agree. That's why we're not going to fight you. The Kilari command staff froze in confusion. This wasn't in any of their combat protocols. If you look at your sensor readings more carefully, Santos continued, you'll notice something interesting about Earth's current energy signatures. Supreme Admiral Cress, watching from the fleet flagship, felt her scales shift to ash gray as the implications hit her. They've done it, she whispered. Full spectrum scan now. The results confirmed her worst fears. In the months since their last engagement, the humans hadn't been building weapons. They'd been completely transforming their civilization. Their cities now ran on perfectly efficient quantum power grids. Their satellites operated on principles that the Kilari had thought theoretically impossible. They had taken the glimpses of advanced technology from their battles and not just copied them, but improved upon them in ways that defied explanation. We want to thank you, Santos said, and the sincerity in her voice was somehow more terrifying than any weapon. Your attacks pushed us to achieve what might have taken us centuries otherwise. But more importantly, they taught us something about ourselves. The hologram expanded, showing scenes from across Earth. Former military facilities converted into research centers. Weapons factories retooled to produce scientific instruments. And most shockingly, humans working alongside captured Kilari technology, improving it in ways its original creators had never imagined possible. You see, Santos continued, we discovered that we're actually better at peace than we are at war. When you forced us to unite against a common threat, we learned that the same adaptability that makes us dangerous in conflict makes us extraordinary in cooperation. From her command post, Dr. Okoro sent additional data streams to the Kilari fleet. We're transmitting the specifications for some of our recent innovations, she explained, joining the broadcast. You'll find our improvements to your quantum drive efficiency particularly interesting. We solved the phase variance issue that's been limiting your ship's performance for the past century." The Kilari technical staff who received the data couldn't believe what they were seeing. The humans hadn't just matched their technology, they'd transcended it, and now they were giving away their advances freely. "This is a trick," Fleet Commander Zix declared. "They're trying to demoralize us." "No," Admiral Vereen said slowly, her scales shifting to the copper tone of fundamental realization. "They're showing us what we should have seen from the beginning. Their strength isn't in their weapons or their tactics. It's in their ability to transform everything they touch, even their enemy's technology, into something better." Supreme Admiral Kress made a decision that would reshape the galaxy. "Stand down the fleet," she ordered. "But Supreme Admiral," Zix protested, "our orders." "Our orders were for a final dialogue," Kress interrupted. "And the humans have shown us that they understand dialogue far better than we do." She opened a channel to Earth. "Dr. Santos, you spoke of cooperation. What exactly are you proposing?" Santos smiled, but there was steel behind her warmth. "A partnership, not subjugation, not integration into your dominion, but true collaboration. You have 3,000 years of stable governance experience. We have an apparently infinite capacity for innovation. Imagine what we could accomplish together." The negotiations that followed would be studied by galactic historians for centuries to come. The humans demonstrated the same adaptability and diplomacy that they had shown in warfare, finding creative solutions to problems that had plagued interstellar relations for millennia. But they also included a warning, delivered by Dr. Santos to the Kilari High Council. "We've shown you two paths," she explained, standing in the ancient council chamber that had never before admitted a non-Kilari. "The first is what happens when you force us to fight. We'll adapt, we'll innovate, and we'll win at any cost. The second is what happens when you work with us. We'll help transform the galaxy in ways neither of us could imagine alone. The choice of which path to take will always be yours. Choose wisely." The Kilari Dominion, for the first time in its history, chose to learn rather than teach. They discovered that humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy wasn't their technology or their combat prowess, but their ability to see possibilities where others saw only limitations. Years later, Admiral Vereen stood on the observation deck of a new kind of ship, one built by human and Kilari engineers working together. Its hull was a hybrid of crystalline perfection and adaptive functionality, symbolic of the partnership that had transformed both civilizations. "We thought we were superior because we had achieved perfection," she told her mixed human Kilari crew. "The humans taught us that true superiority lies not in achieving perfection, but in never stopping the pursuit of something better." As she watched Earth's sun rise over the ship's bow, she reflected on how close they had come to making a terrible mistake. The humans hadn't just proved themselves the galaxy's greatest warriors. They had proven themselves its greatest innovators, its most adaptable diplomats, and ultimately, its best hope for a future that none of them could have imagined alone. The warning they had given the galaxy was not just about their capacity for war, but about their capacity for transformation. Any civilization that encountered humanity now had to ask themselves a simple question: would they fight the species and face their incredible capacity for adaptation in war, or work with them and experience that same capacity applied to peace? The answer, as the Kilari had learned, would determine not just their fate, but the future of the galaxy itself.